What if the most powerful healing protocol ever designed was not invented in a Swiss laboratory or discovered in a double-blind clinical trial at Johns Hopkins, but was written into a text that has been sitting on your bookshelf for your entire life? Here is what almost nobody in the wellness industry is willing to say out loud. The meals described in biblical scripture are not just cultural relics or religious traditions. They are clinically documented combinations of ingredients that researchers today are spending millions of dollars to validate and keep arriving at the same astonishing conclusion. The people who composed these meals understood, through thousands of years of direct human observation, exactly what certain combinations of food do to the human body. Today we are going to walk through 10 complete meals that appear directly in biblical text and show you, with real science, why each one is a healing system that the modern world has almost completely abandoned. Stay with me through this entire list because number 3 involves what researchers at the James Lind Library have identified as one of the earliest documented controlled dietary experiments in human history. And number 1 is a complete protein formula that modern nutritional science spent decades trying to synthesize before realizing an ancient prophet had already written down the exact recipe. Alright, let us start at number 10. Number 10. Ruth's Roasted Grain and Vinegar Dip, the harvester's anti-inflammatory meal. Most people read right past this passage. In the book of Ruth, chapter 2, verse 14, Boaz invites Ruth to the meal table and says to her, "Come here and eat the bread and dip your morsel in the vinegar." She sat beside the reapers and he passed her roasted grain. That is the entire description. Bread, roasted whole grain, and fermented vinegar as a dipping condiment. It sounds like a modest field lunch. It was actually a precision anti-inflammatory combination that modern nutritional science keeps circling back to. The fermented vinegar in this meal was not white distilled vinegar. It was raw, unpasteurized, naturally fermented vinegar rich in acetic acid, active enzymes, and live microbial cultures. Clinical research has now confirmed that acetic acid, the primary active compound in fermented vinegar, measurably reduces post-meal blood glucose spikes, improves insulin sensitivity, and supports the growth of beneficial gut bacteria. A study published in the journal Bioscience, Biotechnology and Biochemistry found that daily vinegar consumption produced meaningful reductions in body weight, visceral fat, and triglyceride levels over a 12-week period. Combined with roasted whole grain, which provides slow-releasing complex carbohydrates and B vitamins, and flatbread, this field meal was a masterclass in blood sugar management. The reapers of biblical harvests were eating an accidental metabolic optimization protocol twice a day. Number 9. Abraham's Hospitality Feast. The meal that stopped 3 visitors in their tracks. When 3 visitors appear at Abraham's tent in Genesis chapter 18, his response is immediate and specific. He rushes to prepare unleavened cakes of fine wheat flour, calls for a tender calf to be prepared, and brings out butter and milk alongside the meat. Read the ingredient list carefully. You have high-quality animal protein from pasture-raised veal, raw fermented dairy in the form of butter and milk from grass-fed cattle, and unleavened, whole-grain flatbread baked fresh. This meal, prepared in less than an hour for unexpected guests, represents one of the most complete nutrient profiles in ancient hospitality cuisine. The butter and milk from animals raised on open pasture in that region would have been naturally rich in conjugated linoleic acid, a fatty acid that modern research links to reduced inflammation, improved body composition, and immune function. The unleavened bread provided complex carbohydrates without the phytic acid buildup that fermented or leavened breads sometimes carry. The combination of animal protein with raw dairy and grain produced a meal that delivered complete amino acids, bioavailable fat-soluble vitamins, and sustained energy in a single sitting. Abraham was not improvising a snack. He was demonstrating what an optimized ancient meal looked like, and modern ancestral nutrition researchers keep pointing back to exactly this type of whole food combination. Number 8. Solomon's Ashishim, the raisin and fig cake of kings. In the Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 5, there is an urgent request: sustain me with raisin cakes, refresh me with apples. The Ashishim raisin cakes, referenced throughout Solomon's court and in multiple feast records of ancient Israel, were a concentrated preparation of dried figs and pressed raisins, sometimes bound with grain and honey. They were given to soldiers to restore energy after physical depletion, to the sick to rebuild strength, and in the verse above, described as sustaining the body under conditions of exhaustion. Raisins are one of the most concentrated sources of boron, a trace mineral that plays a critical role in bone density, joint health, and hormonal regulation, and which is completely absent from most modern processed diets. Dried figs provide extraordinary concentrations of calcium, more per gram than most dairy products, alongside insoluble fiber, pectin that feeds gut bacteria, and phenolic compounds with documented anti-tumor activity in laboratory research. Together in a single preparation, these two dried fruits deliver a mineral and phytonutrient load that the modern world racks up supplement bills trying to replicate. Solomon's court was eating this daily as both a food and a medicinal tonic, and they understood without any biochemistry textbook that it rebuilt depleted bodies faster than almost anything else available to them. Number 7. The Wilderness Bread and Quail Meal, the complete protein rescue of a starving nation. When the Israelites in Exodus chapter 16 cried out that they were hungry in the wilderness, what arrived was not one food, but two, delivered together as a complete nutritional system. Manna in the morning, which ancient and modern scholars describe as a thin, seed-like, grain-textured substance that could be ground, boiled, and baked, and quail in the evening providing dense animal protein. This was not accidental variety. The combination of a complex carbohydrate grain source with lean, complete animal protein is the precise macronutrient formula that modern sports nutritionists prescribe for recovery, muscle repair, and sustained energy. Quail is one of the leanest game birds ever cataloged. Its meat is exceptionally high in protein, rich in B vitamins including niacin and B12, and provides iron in its most bioavailable heme form. The grain component delivered the complex carbohydrates necessary to shovel those amino acids into muscle tissue efficiently. What looks in Scripture like a miraculous provision of two random foods is, from a nutritional standpoint, a textbook protein and carbohydrate pairing that the body absorbs and utilizes with extraordinary efficiency. An entire nation was sustained and physically maintained on this combination for 40 years. Number 6. The Fish and Barley Bread Meal, the cardiovascular medicine of the hillside. In the Gospel of John chapter 6, when Jesus fed 5,000 people, the text is specific about what was used. 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, not wheat loaves, barley. The distinction is not liturgical, it is nutritional. Barley, as we have discussed extensively in nutritional science literature, contains the highest beta-glucan concentration of any grain on Earth. Beta-glucan is the soluble fiber that the FDA has formally approved a health claim for because the research demonstrating its LDL lowering and blood sugar stabilizing effects is that unambiguous. But paired with small fatty fish, likely sardines or anchovies from the Sea of Galilee, which are among the most omega-3 dense fish ever studied, this meal becomes a cardiovascular protection protocol. The omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, and DHA in cold water fish reduce systemic inflammation, lower triglycerides, improve arterial flexibility, and support brain function at the cellular level. The soluble fiber from the barley then travels through the digestive tract, binding to bile acids and carrying excess LDL cholesterol out of the body before it can be reabsorbed. These two foods, working together in a single meal, simultaneously attack the two primary drivers of cardiovascular disease, inflammation and cholesterol dysregulation. The crowd sitting on that hillside was eating the most heart-protective meal combination available in the ancient world. Number 5. The Passover Meal. The annual immune system reset. Exodus chapter 12 verse 8 gives the full prescription. Roasted lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs all eaten together in a single ritual meal. Every element of this combination has a documented biological function that was replicated annually by an entire civilization. The lamb provided a complete protein source, rich in zinc, selenium, and iron, all nutrients that are directly required for immune cell production and function. Zinc deficiency alone is now linked to impaired lymphocyte activity and reduced resistance to infection. The unleavened bread, made without yeast or added sugars, delivered carbohydrates without the inflammatory response that fermented or sweetened breads can trigger in sensitive individuals. And the bitter herbs, which ancient and modern scholars identify as including coriander, parsley, and horseradish, are among the most densely phytonutrient-loaded plants in the traditional Mediterranean diet. Horseradish contains glucosinolates that activate the liver's detoxification enzymes. Coriander has documented anti-diabetic and anti-inflammatory effects confirmed across multiple clinical studies. Parsley is exceptionally rich in vitamin K, vitamin C, and the flavonoid apigenin, which research has shown has significant anti-cancer properties. This meal was eaten at the same time every year, just as spring arrived and before the intensive labor of planting season began. It was a nutritional reset delivered as a sacred ritual, and the combination of nutrients it provided, protein, zinc, liver-supporting bitter compounds, and complex carbohydrates, was precisely calibrated for immune resilience. Number 4. Elijah's Wilderness Bread and Water, the meal that powered a 40-day journey. In 1 Kings chapter 19, one of the most nutritionally remarkable stories in all of Scripture unfolds quietly. The prophet Elijah, physically and emotionally collapsed under a broom tree in the desert, wakes twice to find a cake baked over coals and a cruse of water. He eats. And then, in verse 8, the text records something extraordinary. He went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights. One meal, 40 days. The bread baked on hot stones in the ancient Middle Eastern tradition was a dense, whole-grain flatbread made from either wheat or barley, packed with slow-burning complex carbohydrates, B vitamins, and mineral content that unleavened stone baking preserves far better than modern oven methods. Combined with clean spring water for full hydration, this was a survival meal built for extreme endurance. Modern research on ultra-endurance athletes has shown that complex carbohydrate loading from whole-grain sources creates glycogen reserves that the body burns exceptionally efficiently during prolonged physical exertion. But what the text describes goes beyond conventional physiology. Whatever the composition of that bread, the pattern it represents, simple, whole, unprocessed grain with pure water as the recovery meal after complete physical collapse, is the exact protocol that modern wilderness medicine and athletic recovery science independently recommends. Rest, whole carbohydrates, hydration. Elijah needed a 40-day journey's worth of endurance from a single meal, and he got it. Number 3. Daniel's Pulse and Water Table, the first controlled dietary trial in history. Here's where we stop and let the science speak in a way that is genuinely remarkable. Researchers at the James Lind Library, the international institution dedicated to the history of controlled clinical trials, have formally identified the dietary experiment in the Book of Daniel as one of the earliest documented controlled experiments in human nutrition. Daniel chapter 1, verses 12 through 15. Daniel and his companions asked to be given only pulse, seeds, legumes, grains, and water to drink for 10 days, while the control group eats the king's rich food and wine. At the end of 10 days, the text states they appeared healthier and better nourished than all the young men who ate the king's food. This is not mythology. A 2010 published clinical trial following the Daniel fast protocol for 21 days and 44 participants documented measurable reductions in total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, blood pressure, and insulin levels. The pulse diet, combinations of lentils, beans, chickpeas, grains, and water, provides complete proteins when its components are combined correctly. Enormous amounts of soluble and insoluble fiber, folate, iron, magnesium, and a glycemic load so low it barely registers on blood sugar monitoring. Daniel understood something that Babylon's royal kitchen did not. Process richness depletes the body. Simple, whole, plant-based combinations nourish it at the cellular level. He proved it with a 10-day experiment. Modern nutritional science spent the next 25 centuries catching up. Number 2. Jacob's Lentil Stew, the meal worth a birthright. Genesis chapter 25, verse 34. Esau comes in from the fields exhausted and trades his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of red lentil stew with bread. Scholars have debated Esau's judgment for centuries. Nobody has adequately focused on what the stew itself was. Lentils are among the most nutritionally complete single foods in human history. They provide plant protein in concentrations that match many animal sources, are among the richest dietary sources of folate, contain soluble fiber that flattens blood glucose, feed beneficial gut bacteria, and deliver iron, magnesium, and zinc in meaningful amounts. Red lentils in particular contain extraordinarily high concentrations of polyphenols that function as antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds. A meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that regular legume consumption was associated with significantly reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality. Cooked with the onions, garlic, leeks, and cumin that ancient Israelite stew recipes consistently included, Jacob's pot was not just a meal. It was a concentrated delivery system for immune-supporting, inflammation-reducing, gut-feeding nutrition in a single bowl. Esau was ravenous from physical labor, and his body recognized, at the most primal level, exactly what that stew could do for him. His judgment may have been flawed, his appetite was not. Number 1. Ezekiel's 6-grain bread, the divine formula for complete human nutrition. Ezekiel chapter 4 verse 9. God instructs the prophet, "Take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and spelt. Put them in a storage jar and use them to make bread for yourself." 6 ingredients, 3 grains, and 3 legumes. And here is what makes this bread one of the most discussed formulations in modern nutritional science. No single grain contains all 9 essential amino acids. No single legume does either. But when grains and legumes are combined in the specific ratios this formula requires, they create what researchers now call a complete protein, one that contains every essential amino acid the human body requires but cannot manufacture on its own. This is the same principle behind the traditional staple diet pairings of every major human civilization: rice and beans, corn and black beans, wheat bread and lentil stew. The ancient world arrived at complete protein by observation, long before biochemists even had names for amino acids. But Ezekiel's formula goes further. When these grains are sprouted before baking, soaked until they begin to germinate, the process dramatically increases the bioavailability of every nutrient in the bread. A study examining wheat sprouted for 48 hours found significantly elevated amino acid content, dietary fiber, and antioxidant activity compared to unsprouted grain. The phytic acid that normally blocks mineral absorption in whole grains is broken down during sprouting, meaning the magnesium, zinc, iron, and B vitamins in the bread become fully available to the body, rather than passing through unabsorbed. Modern Ezekiel bread manufacturers sell this product today specifically because clinical nutritionists keep recommending it as the most nutrient-dense bread commercially available. They did not invent the formula. A prophet wrote it down more than 25 centuries ago, and not a single modern improvement has been necessary. Here's what strikes me most when I look at this entire list. Not one of these meals required a laboratory to design. Not one required a supplement protocol, a specialized extraction process, or a manufacturing facility. Every healing mechanism we have walked through, the blood sugar regulation in Ruth's vinegar and grain meal, the complete protein in Ezekiel's bread, the omega-3 and beta-glucan pairing in the barley and fish, the liver-supporting bitter compounds in the Passover herbs, all of it was arrived at through direct human experience accumulated over thousands of years of eating, observing, and passing down what worked. Modern science did not discover these benefits. It confirmed them with clinical trials, biochemical assays, and randomized controlled studies. And in every single case, it arrived at precisely the same place that careful, hungry, observant human beings arrived at long before any of that equipment existed. That should change the way you think about what you put on your table every single day. The gap between what genuinely nourishes you and what the modern food system sells you as nutrition has never been wider than it is right now. These meals require nothing more than whole ingredients, water, fire, and the knowledge of how to combine them. If this list opens something up for you, drop a comment below and tell me which meal surprised you most. Was it Daniel's Pulse table being documented as a clinical trial? The single cake that powered Elijah for 40 days? Or the 6-ingredient bread formula that modern science still cannot improve upon? I read every single comment. If you are not subscribed, hit that button now. We go deeper every single week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next.